This land is your land, and this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. All around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, May Day 2018 is the title of our episode. And we bring this to you proudly. We've been doing May Day productions, programs for many years now. And no exception is May Day 2018. Very interesting sequence of events that have brought us here from the political climate. We look to the Korean Peninsula involving the Democratic Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea in a war that was fought 65 years ago. And now the Korean people on that peninsula are saying enough is enough. We move forward to bring about one Korea and a denuclearized Korea, which a few years ago would have been a pipe dream. But we have to look at the struggles of working people in the Democratic Republic known here as the North and also in the South. The struggle of auto workers there against giant automobile manufacturers. Those are some of the things that stick out. It's beyond the rhetoric of nuclear weapons. Many people have nuclear weapons, including South Africa, the Zionist government in Israel, etc. There's a very long list. But yet on this May Day, now the spotlight is on the Islamic Republic of Iran and the so-called nuclear deal that was struck between the civilized nations of the world. Now the reactionaries want to scuttle that particular agreement. There's a number of reasons for that. One, the price of petrol will go up with the Iranians out of the equation, going towards $100 a barrel. Now, this is one of the things that's happening in this economy. We'll hear from the Florida Senator Marco Vegas Rubio talking about the Trump tax cuts and how they have not benefited ordinary people on this May Day. A very interesting scenario comes. We'll look also at the Poor People's Campaign and the activities that they have planned around various so-called fast food sectors. A word of note here, as far as the economy is concerned, inflation is actually creeping up towards the beyond actually the Fed's 2% mark. And the price of things that ordinary people buy, it costs more this May Day than last May Day. And now gasoline, petrol will be creeping up for the summer driving season, taking away workers' discretionary income. Those are some of the facts. These political events in places like Washington and Michigan do not address the issues. And the issues themselves are complex in the sense that you have an economy now that the rate of unemployment is low by historic American standards. Now that does not mean discourage workers, you're only counting for 26 weeks, etc. Does not bring into account African American unemployment, double that of Europeans in America, and it does not bring into effect the vicious cycle of racism. Nor do we address the healthcare problems brought upon by attempts to defund or decapitate the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, and placing so-called draconian work requirements on Medicaid. State after state under Republican control have attempted to do this, like the Commonwealth of Kentucky that is doing it. The whole idea there is to lessen the number of people that will be eligible and are to discourage them from even applying for Medicaid. And that impacts the health program, no doubt about that. One of the things that we see out here on our landscape increasingly. Now this is where things are getting to be very, very treacherous. Let's go first to Marco Vegas Rubio. And U.S. workers get little benefits from tax reform in a move that could undercut his party's message about, this is from Reuters, the recent tax overhaul ahead of the 2018 midterm elections. He told The Economist magazine there is no evidence whatsoever the tax law significantly helped American workers. There is still a lot of thinking on the right that if big corporations are happy, they're going to take the money they save and reinvest in American workers. In fact, they brought back shares, a few gave out bonuses, but there's no evidence whatsoever that the money has been massively poured back into the American worker. The tax overhaul sailed through the Republican-controlled Congress in December without Democratic support, permanently cutting the top corporate rate to 21% from 35%. Tax cuts for individuals, however, are temporary and expire 2025. Now, they're talking about making those cuts permanent, but with inflation, people realize very little of that. Republicans, including DJ Trump, have said their tax overhaul will lead to a more take-home pay for workers, and taunted the bonuses some workers received from the employers, the Walmarts of the world, etc. Rubio's staff did not deny he made the statement. Rubio voted for the proposal, even though he had lobbied party leaders for a much larger so-called tax credit. The statement is Senator Rubio pushed for a better balance in the tax law between tax cuts for big business and families, as he's done the whole year. The tax law is the Republicans' only significant legislative accomplishment since the rule of DJ Trump. The nonpartisan budget office said earlier this month, its Congressional Budget Office, that the tax bill as written is projected to add $1.9 trillion to the national debt over the next decade or 10 years. And what they're saying here is that we are coming back for more. The caravan, now this caravan groups of people, 8 women and children from a caravan of hundreds. Well, this is also from Reuters. They're seeking a political asylum. And they are on the U.S. border along the caravan set out a month ago on a 2,000-mile track across Mexico and drew attention from Nov and DJ Trump himself. Dozens of members of the so-called caravan, they're down now to several hundred, slept in the open for the second cold desert night in the surroundings of the busy Sanyaro port of entry after pumping fists and cheers of the news late on Monday that the Customs and Border Patrol had opened the gate to 8 women and children. Those left behind said they will continue their set-in for at least allowed to recount their stories. Now they're looking for political asylum. They had at one point about 1,000 people in the group. Only 2 of the dozen people in the caravan who spoke to Reuters over the past month said they were aware of the caravan's existence before they left home. Asylum seekers must document a well-founded fear of persecution at home. So this is one of the things. We also got the news that Efren Rios Montt, the dictator in Guatemala, died at 91, and as the People's World said, met his reward. He was a torturer, but not only that, he was ensconced or embedded in the right-wing Christian movement, the evangelical movement across Central America, and he was enshrined by right-wing evangelistic politicians. Let me just move on here. On the delay of tariffs on various things, steel, aluminium, aluminum, etc., that has been delayed by DJ Trump until the 1st of June. They're supposedly negotiating it. The 25% tariff on imported steel and 10% on aluminium was what they were doing. Now exemptions to the terms are unclear. Have reached agreement with permanent exceptions for Argentina, Australia, and Brazil. So those are some of the nations there, and then the EU, that is still out. We don't have that as of yet. Now, this goes back to our, from the Washington Post, we moved on, rare trifecta of soaring stocks, cheap loans, and low inflation comes to an end. Now, this is something imposed through the government for more than the past decade. 10 years, the U.S. economy has marched through the second longest expansion in history. Americans enjoyed a rare trifecta of a soaring stock value, cheap loans, and consumer prices that rarely rose. That is correct. The favorable climate benefited everyone from people nearing retirement to those buying their first home or just filling their gas tanks. Well, yes, that was a trade-off known as the Obama economy. But suddenly the good fortunes are melting away, impairing the props that support American economic confidence. And, of course, this puts pressure on the DJ Trump administration. Consumer prices, a key measurement, are rising at a faster point in 7 years with massive consumer companies, Mickey D's, Amazon, increasing their prices on some of their popular offers. Amazon on Prime. Mortgage and business loans are becoming much more expensive, and after peaking in late January, the Dow Industrial Average is now roughly flat on the year. Well, no doubt about that. The stock market tends to be a bit ahead of the rest of the economy, and things are not looking that good. But also Mickey D's and a lot of the so-called fast food restaurants are back to the $1 and $2 menus, literally. So that tells you a little bit about what is going on. Overall, the economy is doing well today. Many economists don't expect any disruption this year, but the risk in consumer prices and interest rates, and the stagnating stock market is seen by many as a warning sign. No doubt about that. Diane Swank of Grant Thornton, you're moving from benign to biting is fundamental shift from the world we know. That's what she said, and I fear we're sending boom bust, entering one, or seeding a boom bust cycle. This always happens in industrial capitalism. The boom bust cycles. The stock market has been on track for that particular situation. The yield on treasuries, in other words, when treasuries up at actually about 3%, a level they haven't seen since 2013. But you have to understand, quantitative easing, which the Republicans abhorred and opposed by the Fed, pumped money into the economy, trillions of dollars, to prop up the banks and Wall Street. And the ordinary working people benefited little, but some from that particular scenario and how we arrived at the economy that we have. Now, this tax cut trickle-down scheme that they have going there is moving through in other words, the effects of it are moving through the economy. By June, the bonuses, the tax refunds will virtually be all exhausted. And then we'll look at the petrol prices as to where they are at the particular time. Now, the recent combination of falling stock prices, well, they were overvalued. There's no big deal there. Raises the risk of deep and disruptive drop for share prices. A good analogy to 1987. That is from John Lonsky. He is the chief economist at Moody's Analytics, referring to the market crash now of 1987. This is not a favorable. It is an ominous development. Well, it may not be a favorable, potent, but at the same time, it is an ominous development. The difference, however, though, in 1987, much smaller, not globalized economy. And now even the geopolitical events, more so, such as the actions with Iran. And notice that's being drummed up by the Zionists, etc., have an enormous negative impact on the world as a whole. The other day we talked about on Numbers Man, and we invite you to tune into our financial program, macroeconomics program, I should say. And we talked about some of the emerging markets, Kenya and Ghana, and where they were emerging. But at the same time, if these prices go up, which what has happened is a lot of manufacturers already factored in the anticipation of these tariffs. So we move along there to battle the financial crisis, push short-term interest rates to near zero and let them there for years. Now we're starting to move up on short-term interest rates. Corporate debt outside the financial industry, raising interest rates will inflate the borrowing costs. Note about it. Add $100 billion to the annual debt servicing cost, says from Rosenberg, an economist. And corporations outside the finance industry at the end of last year owed creditors $49 trillion. The debt burden has grown since 2004. Mortgage rates, despite progress in paying off mortgage balances since the collapse, Americans still own more in debt than they have in disposable income. Those are some of the things that we can see. The average 30-year fixed is 4.5. That change added $88 to the monthly cost of a $300,000 mortgage. That's from the Mortgage Bankers Association. On Friday, the Commerce Department reported that prices excluding food rose at 2.5%, and back oil prices at $70 a barrel. That's 50% more than in August. So these are some of the things out there. The Fed's benchmark rate currently hovering at 1.5, 1.7% would need to reach the mark of 3% before it begins slowing on the economy. That's what William Dudley, he's at the New York Federal Reserve. The Fed's expected to increase short-term borrowing rates 3 times more this year. That'll be 4 times there. So we'll see that happening. And more from the Post here. Over the past, Trump has painted a portrait of resurgency. This is on the economy after tanking under President Obama on his Make America Great slogan based on recent polls. Much of the public believes this narrative. The word booming gets thrown around lots. But how is the economy actually performing? The big picture, we've seen a change under Trump. Generally speaking, the economy today is virtually indistinguishable from the economy several years ago. The gross domestic product continues to increase at a modest rate, growing at 2.3% in there. And since Trump took office, non-farm payroll have expanded an average of 180 jobs. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Over President Obama's second term, the average was 216. So there's some there. Have wages been going up under him? Past year, 0.4% in March compared to a year ago. That's where we see that. What about the federal deficit and debt? Deficit, the share of the economy, did grow a lot under President Obama at first. That was largely because of obviously depression. As the economy improves, these deficits shrink but do not go away. In fiscal 16, still under President Obama, they begin to expand again. Now under Trump, they have imploded. So this is the general bingo. President gets too much blame when the economy sours and too much credit when it goes on. So that's one of the things to remember here. We won't go much into Steny Hoyer, but what Steny Hoyer tried to do was discourage a progressive from running out in Colorado. Parties are most active in the swing states, no doubt about that. Parties support keeps candidates in the race. We were going to bring in Dennis Kucinich. Don't have time now. And James Cone, the founder of Black Liberation Theology, died at 79. His books, Black Theology and Black Power, in 1969. We just want to remember him. God of the Oppressed in 75 changed the way we do theology. That is from Kelly Brown Douglas, a professor at the Union Theological Seminary in Manhattan, where Dr. Cohen was long on the faculty. Dr. Cohen, she said, centered the gospel on social justice, just as the Poor People's Campaign is centered also. He was 79 years old, received his Master of Divinity in 1963, a doctorate in 65 from Northwestern University. He was teaching at Adrian College in Michigan when his political views shifted to the Black Power movement. So may Dr. Cohen rest in peace. We'll have more on Dr. Cohen as we switch over to the People's Daily World here, and the Reverend Dr. William Barber and the Poor People's Campaign. The organizing for the $15 hour. They released, and we'll talk more about this, the Soul of Poor Folk, a study of 50 years of change on issues affecting working people, particularly those at the bottom. With destruction of industries and the cities that house them, the nature of our economy has shifted, although the official unemployment rate is low. Employment today often means low-wage work, and this is where our Medicaid part came in. Nearly 1 in 5 families have zero or negative net worth. The number rises to a quarter of Latin American households, 30% of African American households. Starting the day after Mother's Day, the Poor People's Campaign plans to engage in 40 days of civil disobedience in at least 30 state capitals in Washington, D.C. We will append this today, May Day. They'll be in Little Rock, Arkansas, Anchorage, Alaska, organizing an open meeting there. And in Austin, Texas, moral and political and moral education there. And in Accokeene, Maryland. That was on Monday, and today, Wabasha, Wisconsin, Detroit, Michigan, May Day rally there, in March. That'll be at 3:30 p.m. in Topeka, Kansas. Nonviolent Moral Fusion Direct Action training there. Albany, New York, Nonviolent Fusion Directive training there. And the Poor People's Call for Artists, that'll be in Washington, D.C. Interfaith Community Outreach also in D.C. In Paterson, New Jersey, a mass meeting there. It'll be at 7 to 8:30. And in Fayetteville, Arkansas, an education potluck on Wednesday. They'll be in New York, an interfaith strategy for nonviolent direct action. Collins Wood, New Jersey, Jersey City, these are mass meetings. Austin, Texas again, and in Baltimore, Maryland, and in Anchorage, Alaska on the 3rd, Washington, Kansas City, Greensboro, Sylvia, North Carolina, in New York, a fundraiser there, a mass meeting in Trenton, New Jersey, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Austin, Texas, a lot of things in there. Ypsilanti, Michigan, coffee and cake and catch up. That'll be at 2:30 on Friday. Austin, Plainfield, Vermont, Atlantic City. On Saturday, many places. Dearborn, Michigan, Anchorage, Oterno, California, Ickafa, New York, Charleston, South Carolina, Syracuse, New York, Madison, Wisconsin, Nonviolent Fusion Direct Action there. In Detroit, Bangor, Maine, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Chattanooga, Tennessee, another direct action. Highland Park, New Jersey. And on Saturday in New York, Trenton, Nashville, Tennessee, Nonviolent Fusion there. In Cincinnati, Ohio, song led by the Reverend Susan Smith. Song leaders training, I should say. Civil disobedience in Austin, Columbia, South Carolina. Regional seminars. And in D.C., the Reverend Dr. Barber's sermon on war and militarism. Fort Smith, Arkansas, teaching there. And in Portland, Maine, phone banking. That'll be 6 on Saturday. So many things going on here. We took care of him. The fascist government in Ukraine trying to close down May Day, the National Socialist Party of the Ukraine, well-known pro-Nazi operation there, planning illegal pro-worker demonstrations on the next May Day. The current government in Kiev came to power, and that was a coup against Viktor Yanukovych, the democratically elected president. This is one of those various campaigns were underway by the U.S. to destabilize the Ukrainian government and bring in open fascists. Let's move on here to our next wait just one okay, I guess I wanted to take a quick look at the Arizona, but the Arizona teachers are still out there, and we'll have to go back. Anyway, now we'll go to The sport of the day will start with the National Basketball Association. The 76ers were in Boston. Celtics 117-102. They lead the series by one. This is the second round. And we'll jump over to the National Hockey League.
Neal has it. Leads on the right. Here's William Karlsson skating in.
Okay, the Bruins and Lightning. Lightning 4-2 in that contest. And let's see, this is game 2. The series is tied 1-1. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Golden Knights of Las Vegas, and the Sharks. Golden Knights are 4-3. This is in game 2. The series is 2-1. That particular series. On to Major League Baseball. We invite everyone to enjoy Major League Baseball on this and any sporting events on this May Day. And remember Dr. Barber, the Poor People's Campaign. Send a few dollars. Take time at least to reflect on it. The Rangers were in Cleveland 7-5. The Rockies were in Wrigley Field. Rockies 7-3. They did indeed rock Wrigley Field. The Pirates and Nationals in Washington. Nationals 3-2. The Rays and Tigers in the Motor City. Rays 3-2. The Brewers and Reds in Cincy. Brewers 6-5. Very close game there. Kansas City and the Red Sox. It was all Red Sox in Fenway Park. Shut them out. 10-0. The Phillies and Marlins in Florida. Marlins 8-4. Toronto and the Twins in Minnesota. Blue Jays are 7-5 there. The Yankees and Astros in Houston's Astros 2-1. And the Dodgers and D-backs, another slugfest. D-backs 8-5 over the Dodgers. Mr. Stripling was the loser there. And finally, the Padres and Giants in San Francisco. Close game there, 6-5. And the winner was Johnson. Don't know who Johnson was. The loser was Han. And that is the sports. This will do it for us. Happy May Day to everyone. We will, of course, return here on WBRN Radio with more productions. We invite you also to look at James, our show on James Comey, the former G-Man, and his book, Higher Loyalty there. We did a show on it, and of course our Monday Morning Quarterback, where we look more at sports. And we'll go out as we came in with Mr. late, great Mr. Woody Guthrie. And this land is your land.
The voice was chanting as the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, the dust clouds rolling, the voice coming chanting, and the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me.